declaring that you've done the DPI Varroa mite training. The DPI Varroa mite training is available on the DPI website. It takes half an hour and it's very easy. It's made for non-English speakers. So it's very, very, very easy. Basically it shows you how to do an alcohol wash and what a mite looks like, which is good info anyway. Okay? So, you can catch swarms in the blue, you can move them in the blue to another place in the blue. You've got to move them directly, you can't catch them, chuck them in the back, go and get a coffee, and then go home. You need to do it, or catch 2 swarms. Happens a lot, right? Like where you go and you catch a swarm, you put it in the box and you go and get that swarm, you know, because you're like, oh shit, I better get that one. And then you go back to that one, pick it up, and then go over there and grab that one, and then go straight to your apiary. Can't do that, it's supposed to be direct. And you do have to do the alcohol wash and the training and the declaration. Okay? Any questions for me, Paul? Or see me afterwards? Yes?
You just said swarms. Does that mean what about your own hive swarming? Does that fall into that category?
It does.
Or is it just external?
No. This is also true. So a swarm in the blue zone is treated like a hive. So these same movement rules apply for any hive in the blue. If you've got hives in Mossman and you want to move them to the Southern Highlands, you alcohol wash them, declare them on the DPI website, do the training, and you can move. Or do the training, declare them, then you can move. Okay? And the training isn't every time. You do it and it's valid for a period. Okay? So, you just can't move blue, you can't catch a swarm in the blue and move it to purple unless you get a full-on permit where you have to write and that sort of stuff, and that's impractical. Okay? Right, so swarming period. I'm just going to blast through this. It's really long, basically. The swarming period goes from July through to April. It's a bell curve. You get like first little bits and then you get big ones and then you sort of, it dwindles off towards the end. It's quite a long talk, so that's why I'm just sort of blasting through some stuff. Is everyone familiar with how bees swarm? Like how the mechanics of it? So bees within a hive will create a queen cell. The old queen is put on a tight diet to reduce weight. The colony gorges on honey, particularly those that are leaving. And after the new queen is mated, that's how it should work. Sometimes they leave beforehand. But after the new queen's mated, 1/3 to half the colony departs with the old hive, or the hive with the old queen, and the new queen inherits the infrastructure. I like to think that's because the old queen knows what she's doing, and the new queen inherits the best case scenario. Feels like it should work. It's hard to know why that reason is, but that's how it works. Now, why? So these are the main reasons. Natural reproduction is the main one, and that's the biggest problem we're going to have, is that we are trying to get animals which are just totally geared to reproduce, as most are. We're trying to stop that, or we're trying to inhibit that by manipulating their beehive. Second one is congestion. So this typically happens towards the end of the season if the hive is too full, or if the spring build-up is not managed well. Poorly timed supersedure, that's a sort of a niche cutout. That's if the queen is replaced, or you cage the queen, or something goes wrong, and they take it as a swarm trigger. So if you do something to trigger a supersedure, like accidentally damaging the queen, they can use that as a trigger for swarming. And finally, if they're honey and pollen bound. So there's a bit of a difference between congestion and honey pollen bound. The first one is basically when the hive is so full that the thinking and the consensus is that the queen pheromone isn't spread nicely throughout the hive. The second one is just when they just run out of laying room and run out of space, and they think, you know what, we've got enough honey, we've got enough pollen, we've got it, the conditions are good, now it's time to go. Prevention. So, requeen in autumn. Everyone's done that, obviously, I assume. No? Okay, great. Well, too late. We're done. Requeen in autumn, so that's ideal. That's if you've applied for your permit in the purple zone and it's come through and you're able to do it. Young queens are less likely to swarm, typically. There are always exceptions to the rule, but young queens are typically less likely to swarm than older queens. So that's why we like to requeen. Autumn's good because you kind of get a bit of a bonus year out of it. autumn, if you requeen in spring, they sort of go through a season, whereas if you requeen in autumn, her first spring will be the coming spring. Okay? So one thing we can do is a split, which is an artificial swarm or a walkaway split. So those are two types of splits that I'm going to talk about. Another thing that I'm going to do is this is really procedure heavy. This is step 1 is this, step 2 is this. So don't think you have to remember it. I'm going to do a cutout of the steps and provide them in a PDF that you can take with you to the beehive and write the numbers next to it. Tick the boxes as you go if you want. Okay, so don't think you need to worry too much about the actual mechanics of it. And that's also true for the splits. The third is increased space, so frame rotation. And again, this is a very big, involved procedural thing where we're just creating space, and we're generally doing that for 2 reasons. Firstly, we want to create that space to avoid congestion and to give them laying space. Secondly, it's to muck them around a bit. If you've got a hive which is in disorder, they're less likely to leave on a swarm until it's ordered. If you can keep it in a constant position of disorder, it will help. Finally, don't destroy drone or queen cells. If you're seeing queen cells, it's too late to frame rotate. You won't be able to stop them by destroying queen cells. You've got to go into the split phase. Okay, and we'll talk about that later on. And drone cells, that's just wasteful. So destroying drone cells, the bees are wanting to make drone cells. If you take the drone cells out or destroy the drone cells, they'll just make more. You may as well let them get on with making drone cells. It's a sign of a good hive. Bees will make drones under normal circumstances when times are good, because drones, males within a hive, are just a burden on the hive. Now, frame rotation. So this is a beehive. It doesn't look like one, but it is when viewed from above. Wooden box, because they're the best. And 8 frames, because that's not what I use, but it just meant I needed to do this drawing on PowerPoint. So they're numbered 1 to 8, and I've just chosen blue as like the way you see it. So they're the old hives. There will be colours introduced through this. The colours don't mean anything unless I say they do. It's just as an indication of what we're doing. Okay? And as I said, frame rotation, we're mucking the bees around, and we're also just creating that space and creating space, particularly within the brood box, which is where we're focusing here. Now, frame rotation. Step 1. We're removing frames 1 and 8. Now, when you open your brood box, they're most likely to be full of honey. It's rare to have brood wall to wall. It's normally going to be honey, okay? Or pollen, or something that isn't brood with an empty comb. So we remove frames 1 and 8. You've got 2 options. These frames can be totally removed. You can take them out, harvest them, do whatever you like, or you can move them up into the honey super. If you do move them up into the honey super, you need to shake them off. And that's so you don't accidentally lift the queen up if the queen was walking on that frame. And the second thing you need to do is put them in positions 4 and 5. So typically, we try to, if we're moving frames up, we put them in the middle at the top, because we want to create, bees will naturally create a cluster. If they create a cluster, we kind of want them centralised in that cluster. We don't want to move them to the edge, otherwise they could be ignored. And I'm not sure whether everyone's seen it, but you get mouldy frames every so often if you do that. Typically they'll be the ones that are not covered by bees.
Do you not like to move the edge ones full of honey for insulation?
I found that it makes very little difference, really, and we are talking about spring. So we're talking about, we're normally not rotating frames in winter or autumn. We're talking about spring where the weather's warming up, conditions are generally good. Bees are happy to move out and the population's expanding as well. So the requirement for insulation is usually less. If you're worried about that temperature and insulation, then maybe look at the time when you're doing it. Okay? And that raises a good point. The time to start doing frame rotation is when you open the box up and you go, oh shit, there's a lot of bees in there. Right? Typically we want to see 7 frames of bees covered, not sort of the winter little cluster. We want to see them building up. So we want to see bees there. We don't want to start this process too early. We also don't want to open it up and go, oh wait, there's no bees in there, but there should be because they've already swarmed. So we kind of want to be watching and preparing for this around late August, mid to late August, depending on weather. Basically, what I use is if 2 people at the coffee shop say, oh, spring's here, then that's usually an indication for me. Okay? So, frame rotation. So we've removed frame 1 and 8, and then we've slid the frames apart. So we've got 2, 2, 2. So frames in position 1 and 2, and 7 and 8. Right? Is everyone following what we've done? Then we insert waxed and wide frames. So just pretty much brand new frames with wax on them, or what I call safe, stored, drawn comb. And that's not just any old comb from anyone's hives that they gave you because it could have disease. This is hives from the same colony, stored well, not full of wax moth and all sorts of horrible stuff. Okay?
Andrew, there you could use those frames that you took out if they were full of honey.